Came on. My name is Dr. Dara Rampasad, and I am the proud owner and operator of BluePaz First Responder Services.
All right, thanks, Dara. And hello, everybody. As Dara said, I am Deputy Chief Shaun McColgan. I serve with the Danbury Police Department in Connecticut. Previously, I served with the NYPD. And I'm going to go about this. This is a personal journey for me, so I'm going to start it off like I normally start it off many days and evenings of my week, which is, hi, everybody, I'm Shaun, and I'm an alcoholic. So I got into recovery 6+ years ago, and it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I'm here to talk about it because I've spent a lifetime trying to help other people. And when the time came that I needed help, I didn't know how to ask for it, nor did I recognize that I needed it. And that's kind of sort of the message I want to get to people out there, is that you sometimes have to look inside yourself to make sure that you're helping you while you're helping everybody else. So a little bit of my background. Born in New York City, I'm one of 9 children to an Irish American family. I grew up with an alcoholic father who was also a child abuser and a wife beater. We had a very tumultuous childhood. I remember scenes of my father smacking me and knocking my mom across the room when I was 7 or 8 years old. We got separated as a family many times growing up. Eventually, we went to live with my grandmother for a number of years, and my mom wound up suffering a nervous breakdown and went to a mental institution. She was in a hospital for 4 years. So as I got into my teen years, I was getting myself in trouble. I was being moved around from place to place. My mom got out of the mental hospital and got custody of all 9 of us, which in retrospect was a really bad thing that happened because she had no control over any of us. So luckily there was a distant family member who had opened up a place in upstate New York called Boys Land, which was a residence for homeless boys. So at the age of 13, I moved to Boys Land upstate, and that turned out to be a lifesaver for me, because it got me off the road of juvenile delinquency and got me back on track. I went to school, spent 4 years there, 5 years there, graduated from high school there, and then immediately joined the Navy. 3 weeks after I got my high school diploma, I went into the Navy, and I spent 4 years there. I got out of the Navy and started looking at police jobs, went back to college. My grandfather on my mother's side had been a New York City police detective, and he was my role model. Certainly my father was not a role model. So my grandfather, big tall guy, he would always wear those fedoras and always wearing a suit. And I remember when I was a little kid, he would come into the house and he had his revolver in a brown paper bag, and he would put it up on the top shelf in the kitchen. I knew what it was, but I couldn't get to it. But, so he was my role model. So I kept looking for jobs. And in 1984, I got hired by the New York City Police Department. I worked in the housing police for 6 years, got to see a lot of stuff, got to work in the largest housing project in the world, I believe, Queensbridge houses, and was on my way. But that's not what I really wanted to do. For a city kid going to Boys Land and being out in the country, I was like, wow, I really like this. You can go outside. I'm used to being in a city where the phone rings and 35 families run inside to try to get the phone, and going up to Boys Land where you were outside and you could yell and scream, do whatever you want, and nobody heard a thing. So I really prefer to have done that. So we started looking around, as did many people, many officers that I worked with, and I wound up coming here to Danbury, Connecticut in 1990, got married, had a family. 97, I made sergeant. 98, I went to the detective division. I took over the special victims unit. and we handled all child abuse and sex abuse claims. And once again, I felt like the background I had as a child was going to be very helpful to me in that field, and I think it was. In '99, I joined the hostage negotiations team, and I did that for 15 years. And then in 2002, we went on a family trip to Disney World. We came back, and the next month, we were discussing some furniture in our living room, and my wife said, I want a divorce. And, my first thought was, is it something about the furniture you don't like? I don't know, because I thought I had the perfect marriage. Like I used to say to people, people would say, how are things going? I was a dad. I had 3 young kids at the time. And I said, I wish everybody could be as happy as I am. And my other big thing that I used to tell people all the time, if I die tomorrow, I die a happy man. I got that perfect family, the perfect job. I got the beautiful house in the country with the white picket fence. Everything was going good. And then divorce came along. So that was rough. The children were 8 and 10. I had twins. Anyway, life goes on. In 2005, I met a lady, Eileen, and we started dating, and I thought that was great. So everything's going good. The job's going good. I got promoted to lieutenant. I involved in hostage negotiations. I joined the local mental health board. I was getting involved with doing mental health work in the area. I thought that was good because that related to my mom. So everything's going great. And then things started not going so great. Eileen was having problems, both financially and within her own family. It was trying to divide time between 3 young kids and a girlfriend and taking care of myself and taking care of them. So eventually, around 2010, 2011, I wound up having to file for bankruptcy. And that was a shameful, harmful thing in my mind. That was something I never wanted to do. And I still regret it to this day. I mean, I understand it. I know it needed to be done, but it was a tough decision to make. And at the same time, that was because I was trying to pay for 3 kids, child support, taking care of them, taking them on vacation, taking care of a girlfriend that was having financial trouble, trying to help her with her bills. So I was doing trying to help everybody except for me, and got into trouble from it. So 2011, I go through the bankruptcy, and without even thinking about it, I was drinking, and I was drinking more. There was a long period of time I never drank at all. But 2011, I start drinking more, and I think it's to kill the pain of the bankruptcy and trying to survive all of this. And, the job was never a problem. I loved my job. I loved the work I was doing. I thought I was doing great stuff. When I was a child abuse detective in hostage negotiations, 2009, I started a crisis intervention team here and became the CIT coordinator. Went on to start teaching in that field. So all that's going well, but in my personal life, things are not so good. And Eileen was now living with me, not by choice. She just kind of moved in here after her mom passed away and spent more and more time with me. So we're sitting around at night drinking, and I remember saying to her, I think it was around 2012 when my dad passed away, I said, do I have a drinking problem? And she said, no, absolutely not. So I said, great, let me go open a bottle of wine, it meant to be a little humorous there, but that was the reality of what I was doing, and now I know, and this is what I'm going to say. If you or anyone is asking that question, do you think I have a drinking problem? Do you think I'm an alcoholic? You've already answered the question just by asking it. And that's something that I didn't know. My father went through recovery, AA, but he was what we call a dry drunk. He got sober, but he didn't get any better. He was still a mean, horrible human being. He was just sober. And for me, never thought that AA was an answer to anything, you know, because I didn't think it did anything for my father other than he wasn't drinking. So we're now in this period where I'm coming home at night and I'm drinking, and I'm sitting there with Eileen and she's drinking, and the two of us are drinking, and I started having blackouts. I remember going to my father's funeral. I was late getting down there for the wake because I had been drinking so much the night before. Nobody at work knows anything because I'd been a pretty good employee. I'd saved up a lot of sick time, so I'm using time when I need to, but not so much to draw any attention to myself. I'm still doing all those things at work that I was doing. And 2013, I wind up in a hospital for a week. I spent a week in a hospital, which now I know was for my drinking. But when I went to the hospital, my oldest daughter had moved in with us, and she took me to the hospital in the middle of the night because I was having quite a bit of pain. I got admitted, and it was all alcohol-based, pancreatitis, number of other things. And about 4 or 5 days in, a doctor comes in, and he talks to me, and he says, Mr. McColgan, you have to stay away from alcohol. It's like an allergy to you. That's like poison. You taking alcohol is like a poison. It's like your body's allergic to it. You have to stop drinking. And in my demented mind, because I didn't recognize a drinking problem yet, I said, well, thank God. I was beginning to think I was an alcoholic. Now I just know I have an allergy, right? So I quit drinking for about 3 or 4 more months. And then, as happened several times, I would have a blackout. I'd wake up. I wouldn't know what happened, how I got to that position. I still couldn't tell you in those days when I would drink, how is it that on some nights I would stop drinking, go to bed, get up and go to work, and other days I would just wake up in the morning and not know where that tipping point comes, because you don't realize that you're drinking, and 1 minute you know what you're doing, and the next minute you have no idea what you're doing. Get out of the hospital, like I said, a few more months, lose a friend on the job, a captain who I considered a mentor. He'd been sober for 16 years and then decided that he thought it was safe to drink. And on 4th of July weekend in 2013, we found him dead in his house upstairs. Can't say positively it was alcohol based, but you know, that's what I believe. He was found in his bathroom, and it was very unfortunate to lose him like that. He fell off the wagon and he couldn't get back on it, and no matter what we did, he wound up having to retire from the job. It was very sad. So around rolls 2013, and things are going great. I'm the CIT Officer of the Year for the state of Connecticut. I'm the Danbury Police Department Officer of the Year. I remember at my big dinner that they threw for me that the girlfriend was like pushing drinks up on the dais for me, you know, and I didn't think about it. Went out to a bar afterwards with the crowd, had a couple of drinks. I had this ability when I was out in public to not show my alcoholism. I didn't overdrink. I didn't get drunk. I had that. I have to be respectable. I have to remember I have children. I have to remember the job I have. I don't want to embarrass anybody. So I kind of kept it all confined to in the house. And then for me, 4th of July weekend, I had another blackout. So that was my 3rd or 4th one. And I started saying, and that's when I kind of realized that I better do something. And because I didn't know how to ask for help, I drove in for my 4 to 12 shift, and I was drunk. And I got to work, and I reported in for the shift commander's job. And the supervisor that I was relieving was like, "Boss, you're drunk." And he took me into my office, and they called the deputy chief at that time. And deputy chief said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I have a drinking problem." And I am eternally grateful that my department took care of me. They got me into rehab. They got me better. They put me out on sick leave And the deputy chief at that time said, Shaun, I know that whatever it is that's causing you to have this problem with alcohol, it isn't this job. He recognized, he says, I think the best thing that we can do for you is get you back to work. There's something going on in your personal life, I think, is what's causing this. And he was exactly right. That's what it was. It was my personal life. And I came back to work. A lot of people, I don't even know today how many people have any idea that I am in recovery. But the job was the best thing I had going for me. And it was, like I said, I didn't know how to ask for help for myself. I didn't know how to go to one of my fellow officers, a peer support officer, a friend, and say, hey, I have a problem, because I couldn't see it in myself. And that's the big thing I'm trying to pass along, is that, you may spot it in a friend. They may ask you a question. They may hint at it, but they may not realize it. And that's where you can say, hey, I'd like to offer you some help, because I do think that you're reaching out. When I would ask my girlfriend, am I an alcoholic? Do I have a drinking problem? And contrary to what a lot of people think, most police chiefs are not looking to hurt their officers. If you want to speak to a very black and white, we are officers. Every one of us is an asset to a department. We are a work product. We are a tool. And the last thing they want to do is have an officer with 10, 15, 20 years on the job that has a problem with alcohol to boot them off the job, because you have to replace that person. You have to train somebody new. It costs about $200,000 to take somebody off the street, test them, run them through everything that has to be done, get them through an academy, get them through their field training. So they would prefer that they can save you. So I know there's a stigma out there. There always was a stigma. It still exists, but my chief and we understand the issue. And I'm going to tell you, look at me. Here I am, 9 months after I got sober, and I took the test for deputy chief and wound up getting promoted. And my life has been great. That first year, everybody said in the world of AA, they said, oh, you're just experiencing that pink cloud. And well, if I'm experiencing a pink cloud, I'm 6.5 years into a pink cloud here. My relationship with my children has been wonderful. I was able to end the relationship with that woman that I was with at the time. And I recently spoke to her, and I'm very happy to find out that she herself got into rehab, and she is 2.5 years in recovery. So that's also something that I'm very proud about. And there's a lot of things that have gone on. I don't think stress is related to it. An interesting side note, my son and I are both drummers, and I had been trying to get him to join a bagpipe band, which I had been doing when I was a New York City cop. And, he really wasn't overly interested. But when I got sober, I think he thought it would be helpful. And 3 months into my sobriety, he said, hey, Dad, there's a great bagpipe band just across the border over in New York. I think maybe we ought to go join it. So those of you who are in the world of policing know that's being in a bagpipe band means being in a bar and drinking. So I can successfully say I did join the band because I wanted to do something with my son. And again, I find that world is vastly different from the 1980s when I played in a band and everybody went out and got drunk afterwards. There's a lot of people that don't drink anymore. And I never had any grief or anything else from any of the band members. Nobody ever pressured me into drinking. I been in many, many bars since then. I'm not telling you that I'm encouraging you to go to bars. I'm just saying that, I was able to do that and enjoy myself. And I have learned that when I'm at a bar and I'm done with the band and we're done playing and I've had my fill of Coca-Cola or Sprite or whatever, to just get up and go, say your goodnights and go. So I now go to AA meetings. I attend 2-3 meetings a week. I do peer support here. We've worked very hard to have our peer support program up and running. And we've brought on, the chief and I have hired actually a staff psychologist to work with the department. I've regained my faith. I've gone back to church. I do attend AA meetings. When a buddy of mine from work came to my house and said, I want to take you to an AA meeting, I was like, no way. And he did convince me with a couple of other members that showed up at the house. I went to a meeting, turned out to be good. I didn't think it was going to work for me, and it's worked wonders for me. And I'm very blessed and grateful that AA's in my life, and it's brought my faith back. Since then, I had one of my children was the victim of a brutal crime, and I was able to help her in sobriety. And I was very grateful that I was sober, because I have no idea what I would have done had I still been drinking and not have control over myself. We lost an officer in 2017 to suicide. It was a horrible, terrible thing. We worked hard with our peer support there and for our department, and personally, it was hard to deal with, and I stay in touch with his family, and we tried to do programs. I think I've talked to Dara about it a number of times. So there's what can I tell you? What else can I tell you is I lost my brother to suicide 4 years ago. He was in the program, and he came off the wagon, and he, between his gambling debt and his drinking, he couldn't take it anymore, and he went home one day and he hanged himself in the shed, and his young son found him. And then my brother-in-law was killed by a drunk driver 2 years ago, and then last year his wife, my sister, passed away. I don't think it was alcohol based, but I think it was from a broken heart from losing her husband, because it was just him and her together. They had no children, but I managed to survive all those things. I'm very blessed to be in the position that I'm in today. I tell my story because I hope that other people will realize, here I am, a deputy chief of police, and I am clean and sober and trying to help others and trying to show you that leadership is not looking to screw the cops over or hurt one another. We want to save you. We want to help you. We've helped a number of our officers here over the last couple of years. And again, I know of another peer support officer here that was helping everybody in the department but couldn't help himself, and trying to tell him that, hey, you got to help yourself. It wasn't working. At some point, something clicked. Now he's clean. Now he's doing the right thing with his fellow officers still. So you can get better. You have to learn how to spot it in yourself. I don't have any magic knowledge to tell you how to do that, but we're here to help, not hurt. Get by the stigma. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to reach out to your fellow officers and ask them for help, or to offer it to them. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Shaun. As you talk about these things, this brings up stuff for all of us, of course, right? And I'm thinking about a couple of things here. One of the things that I would like for us to address, and if I could hear from your perspective, is the conversation about people who are getting DUIs now. I know that sometimes we have departments that is a singular offense that you're going to be fired immediately. You're not going to have any other chances. And then I know of other places that have had their officers have had DUIs, and they help to support that officer. You talked about the cost, of course, financial cost of having someone that loses, that you lose that person, so you have to recruit somebody else and train them up. But are you aware of, or what are your thoughts about somebody who gets a DUI as a symptom of it being part of whether it's their personal life or whether it's a professional issue that may have some kind of stress response or post-traumatic stress injury, or as we were talking about with Dan, even some moral injury attached to it? Are we doing enough, and is there more that we can do? And what have you seen in your career, please?
Well, the captain I was talking to you about, that I lost in 2013, he was the subject of a DUI arrest. And I couldn't tell you to this day what caused him to start drinking again, and whether it was job-based. He had also gone through a divorce. I don't know if that had something to do with it. So I don't know if it was off the job or on the job. But like you just said, I don't think most departments, this is my gut talking, are looking to fire officers because they have a DUI. You know, it is a serious issue, but what they want to do is they want to help the officer to get better. And when you get on the other side of it, like I did, going through an intensive outpatient program and sitting in a room with 15 or 20 other people talking about their experience, you want to learn about empathy. I thought I was a very empathetic individual, you know, with my childhood and everything I went through. I thought I understood it. And then I became an alcoholic and I went to the other side, and then I went through the treatment and I went through the therapy, and I got to see the group therapy and to hear other people's stories. And my empathy was greatly enhanced. You know, drug addicts, I understand a lot of that. I saw people that got addicted to painkillers and opiates. And it wasn't because they loved the feel of the drugs. It was because they had a back injury, they got hurt, they started taking Oxycontin. They weren't able to get it anymore, or it became too expensive, or they didn't have health insurance. And what do you turn to? You turn to heroin to dull the pain. And they go down that same road. I do believe that it is a gene within us. I do believe that there's a hereditary gene that it's an addiction gene. It doesn't just hit alcohol. I think it hits gambling, sex, drug abuse. There's many things. But like we were saying, I think going back to what you were asking, I do think, you know, we've had officers where they have a DUI, and you do have to deal with that internal matter. But if the officer gets help, he can become a great asset to the community and to the rest of the department.
I agree with you. I think that, I want to talk a little bit about your experience with AA, because I know that that's something that has worked well for you. And I know that there are also people who are opposed to AA because they don't want to have the faith-based kind of background of it. And they want to try to seek alternative ways of getting treatment or just trying to heal themselves. And you had said something to me in a conversation we had maybe a couple of years ago, where you said when you were part of the group, it was an eye-opening experience to hear the hatred that people had towards police, and you were the police, and you were inside of the group, and you remember that conversation and how you responded?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I remember exactly that conversation, but I do remember that I still to this day do not advertise when I go to AA meetings who I am. Like many people in AA, you run into people. I've run into members that I see in the rooms, and they see me in uniform, and I get that, holy crap, you're a cop, you know? But when I was sitting in my intensive outpatient, you know, I remember one gentleman that was in there that I just bonded him out over the weekend as the shift commander. And I remember that one of the therapists was speaking about how much he disliked cops. And so I thought he knew who I was. And I went up to him and said, so I'm guessing you know that I'm a police officer. And he didn't. And we spent the next 4 months going through therapy together. And I'll never forget when I was leaving, he came up to me and said, listen, you really changed my mind about police officers, and you know, we're all human beings in this together. And I'm sorry that I had that horrible attitude toward cops, and I hope you can forgive me. And I said, hey, we're all human beings. We should all be forgiving one another. So I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to, but.
Yeah, it was exactly. You know, Shaun, right now, I know this because I work with so many folks in therapy, but even folks that are even anecdotal to me that are living in the community as first responders, drinking alcohol is really a part of the culture of what has developed over the course of the years, right? Decades, centuries, even. Um, I know that some people are really struggling on a daily basis. Some people are coming home and they're numbing their day out by having 6 beers.
Mhm.
Might be on 12, some might be on 30. The most that I've had has been 30 to 36, and then they're doing shots of hard alcohol with it as well. They're stuck in a funk, but maybe they don't realize that they are probably, they don't have to be that way. and life could be better. How do you reach people like this that may even be in our audience, that this is part of the culture that they grew up in and may be stuck in? Because it's not only a physical addiction and an emotional and mental addiction, we have a habit that is formed, and it's pretty difficult to break. So I want to pick your brain on that, if you don't mind.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know the answer to that. I think I said that early when I started talking, is that I couldn't see it in myself. So I am asking everybody to look to one another and to do just what you said. If there's people on here today, because I'm sure that without thinking about it, when I said, hi, my name is Shaun and I'm an alcoholic, that probably a good 20, 30, 40 people, just without thinking about it, said, hi, Shaun, because guess what? They're in the rooms too, you know? But that's where I'm, the ones that aren't, the ones that haven't been to AA, that's where I'm saying you need to look at yourself. If you're thinking about it right now, you know, you should admit that you have a problem and go get help now. Good. You know, maybe you don't need to go to AA all the time. Maybe you don't have to go the route where I had to go, where I was at risk of losing my job. I came into my job intoxicated, and luckily, you know, like I said, the deputy chief who sat in this seat before me said, I don't think it's the job. I think it's your personal life, but we want to get you help and we don't want to lose you. And that's what I'm saying, is that that's across the board, whether it's compassion or human interest, or the fact that just the black and white of it is, you don't want to take all that time and spend all that money on that tool, which is you, to lose you. You want to make you better and make you productive, and then turn your negative experience into a positive experience, which is what I think I've done. So
Yeah.
to answer your question, Dara, I don't have an answer. I don't know how to get people to be able to see that they're the problem, because I certainly didn't. And it's helping everybody else, helping other people with alcoholism or other mental health issues, whatever it was. Never thought, hey, dude, you need to help yourself.
hmm Thank you, Shaun. You know, you had talked about yourself being part of the peer support team. I think that we probably have a fair number of people here who operate in some sort of peer support fashion in their departments or in whichever agencies they belong to, or even the behavioral health staff that are on here. And what I've noticed, and you could tell me if you've seen this as well, is that their peer support members, and I know you touched on this, peer support members are oftentimes put into positions of leading peer support teams when they themselves may be having a hard time and they have no formal training in counseling, in learning how to take on people's problems and what to do with them. You know, and I feel, as you mentioned in your own self, and with people that you've worked with, I've seen that in people that I've worked with as well, that, you know, the peer support team member ends up becoming an alcoholic or being addicted to drugs or prescription medications, and then they get fired for it. I've seen that piece of it. Have you seen that as well? And you have any kind of concrete advice to those peer support team members to try to, does your department do training, for instance, to bolster their skill sets? So that way they can better help people, things like that.
Well, in the state of Connecticut, there's an organization called CABLE, the Connecticut Alliance to Benefit Law Enforcement. Dara, I know you know it well, and you know the lady who started it, Louise Pyers, who started it because her son was trying to commit suicide by cop, and luckily that didn't happen. But she saw that there was a need to train officers, so she started CIT in the state of Connecticut. And since then, we've now moved into peer support and officer wellness, and we hold several retreats throughout the year, and we do a 5-day peer support training. So it's done statewide by the same organization. So my department doesn't specifically hold peer support training, but we send officers to peer support training, and we do encourage it. And basically, I think what you were saying was, I was speaking about an officer in my department who's a peer support officer that needed to get help. And again, I don't know personally what his story was, but I bet you that a lot of it had to do with, you begin to internalize everybody else's problems. Just like you said, you're so busy helping everybody else, it's building up inside of you. That could be some of that cumulative stress that we've talked about, that people don't realize that you dealt with this and you dealt with that. And, you know, I'm trained. I've seen a lot of shit in 37 years of police work, you know, saw a lot of crap when I was a New York City cop. But, you know, I think I had no problem, but that builds up, that becomes cumulative for some people. And when you're doing peer support and you're helping your fellow officers and people are coming to you saying, what can I do? Sometimes maybe it's a financial problem, a gambling issue. Somebody has an affair and now they regret it and they don't know how to deal with their life after that. There's many, many things, and you're taking that all on your shoulders and you're holding that all inside of you, and you're trying to find a way to take care of yourself. So you go home and you open a bottle, you know, to take the blues away. So, and that's where I say each of us needs to look at each other and say, how can we help one another? Because a lot of peer support officers are helpers. They're helper people. They want to please everybody. They want everybody to be their friend, and they oftentimes don't know how to look inside to themselves and say, hey, somebody needs to give me a hand.
Yeah, well said, Shaun. Thank you. We have a question that came up here from Roseanne, and she said, does one have to wait for an individual to realize that he or she needs help? Denial or resistance, hard to persuade an individual or an adult that they need help. Can one gently say, this is what you need to do to allow us to help you? Has that technique worked for you before with people that you've worked with, where you know, maybe realize that they are not in a mental space to realize that they have an issue, but you direct them and guide them towards what they need to do in order for them to stay on the job?
Yes. You know, people who knew me in a department, after I got sober and moved into this position, would come to me and say, hey, so-and-so needs help, so-and-so. And I did reach out to them and I did talk to them and I did all that off the record stuff. And then unfortunately, you know, I am, as the deputy chief in charge of operations for the department, which involves personnel. And, you know, the chief had said to me, hey, just be careful here, because sometimes these people that are reaching out behind the scenes for help, you may have to go and do something official with them. And he didn't mean it in a negative way. He just said, you know, that could be an awkward position for you to be in. But so far, yes, I have had a couple of people, and I'm going to tell you, the couple of individuals that I did work with, they didn't get the message the first time, the second time, the third time, but they weren't doing anything to jeopardize their jobs at that time. It just, people started noticing things and mentioning it to me, and I would go and talk to them, and I never ordered them or anything. And I'd say, look, I've been where you've been. I see the road you're on. I'd like to offer some assistance. And the two specific officers I can think of, they are both did go into recovery and got better. They went to rehab, you know, and now they're very productive. They were very productive beforehand. They're even more productive now. And it's great to see. And that makes me very happy when I see that. And I do also understand you can fall off the wagon more than once. And like you were saying about going to the AA meetings, that's that part of the thing about going to AA, listening to the stories. You don't have to believe in God to go to AA. They don't tell you have to go to church or any of that stuff. It's just one facet of the program. You don't have to say the Hail Mary, the Our Father, or anything else, but go. Listen to the stories. Those are my favorite. What do they call them? Drunkalogs. I love the drunkalogs, because every drunkalog, somebody says something and I say, that's why I don't want to go pick up a drink, because I forgot about that, but he just reminded me, or she just said something. So, so I do encourage you. There are other programs besides AA, but AA works for me, and you could find it everywhere these days. And as Dara, I think you and I talked about, AA Zoom meetings now, you can go to an AA Zoom meeting anywhere in the country that you want. If you want to protect your anonymity, you know, and you're not comfortable in your hometown, well, then go to AA and pick something out in Hawaii, or, you know, come here to Connecticut. We have a bunch of them here. You know, you can go wherever you want. I mean, in person does work great, but there are options.
You know, Shaun, you and I were joking around when we were talking about that, and I was telling you, if you want to learn Portuguese, you could do a Portuguese AA meeting and do anything that you want
Yes.
to. because now the 2020 has opened up our scope to be able to connect with people on this virtual level like we're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
But another point of that is that I think that whether you're in the Brazilian police force, if you are in the UK police force, if you are in Hungarian police force, no matter where you are in the world, I think that the first responder culture shares some similar traits. And alcohol is pervasive, and the kind of
Mm-hmm.
self-medication is pervasive across the first responder communities, no matter where you are in the world. And so this is why I think programs like you've been involved in are so beneficial, because you see a camaraderie of people that get together that have similar issues. And I think sometimes for people it's hard to put aside their pride and ego, and when they themselves are
Yes.
called to say, look, I'm 911, right? Just like Anna Bonham was saying last week, if you're 911, you should know how to fix the problem, should know how to fix the problem, right? Our common thinking error. And so nobody else could tell me what to do, that they can't teach me what to do. I should know what to do. And if I don't know what to do, that means that there's no solution for it. And that is a pride and an ego and a training sort of kind of skill set that we pick up. But how do you overcome that pride and ego to humble yourself if you're looking towards, the fact that you have an issue?
Well, one, you have to realize it's not a weakness. I looked at this as a strength. Getting sober has been a huge strength to me. There's been a big benefit to the community I serve and to my fellow officers, and in my personal life. I feel I'm a much stronger individual now than I was when I was, in those 3 or 4 years of the deep throes of drinking, where I wasn't a help to anybody, especially myself. Um, I just, the girlfriend that I've been with the last few years, recently, as we've been starting to go back out to dinner and stuff, or meeting up with friends and stuff, when somebody finds out that I'm in recovery, you hear, "Oh, you are? Guess what? I'm in recovery too." That happens a lot. She said to me a couple of weeks ago, she goes, "Do we have any friends that are not in recovery besides me?" She goes, "I kind of feel left out of the program." And it is amazing how many people are in it and you don't know it. You have no idea that they're in it. So it's a strength to get in there. It's a strength to be able to help other people to get better and be in a position to do something. Stop looking at it as a weakness. It's not a weakness. It's a weakness until you get the help for it, and then it becomes a strength. It becomes one of your superpowers.
There's no way to end on a better note than that, Shaun. Thank you very much for taking your story and putting it out to the world, and to hopefully give somebody strength to be able to follow in your footsteps. You are a mentor to a lot of people, and I know that I have a lot of respect for you for just being who you are, but sharing your story with us. Thank you so much, my friend.